A single whispered sentence could determine the fate of an entire kingdom. In the shadows of the Dark Ages, secret whisper networks moved vital intelligence across dangerous lands, using methods so clever they often hid in plain sight. By the end of this journey, you will understand the invisible architecture that powered medieval politics and intrigue. How did a tapestry's pattern convey a treasonous warning, and what simple household object could carry a message for hundreds of miles without detection? The answers reveal a timeless truth about the power of hidden information. What do you believe is the most valuable secret ever kept? Think about the sheer distance between two medieval towns. A journey we now measure in hours could take weeks on roads that were little more than muddy tracks, haunted by outlaws and wild animals. This was the fundamental reality of medieval life. For the vast majority of people, the world ended at the edge of their village fields. News from the outside was a rare and often distorted commodity, arriving months late if it arrived at all. In this world of profound isolation, information was not just power, it was a matter of survival. Who, then, could you trust to carry a message? The official channels did exist, but they were few and fraught with their own perils. The king had his royal messengers, brave souls granted safe passage, but their movements were public and watched. The church maintained a sprawling network of monasteries, where letters could travel between brothers of the same order, yet these communications were often subject to ecclesiastical scrutiny. And then there were the merchants. Their caravans and ships were the closest thing to an information superhighway, carrying gossip and market news from port to port. But merchants talked to everyone, and a valuable secret could easily become just another piece of merchandise, sold to the highest bidder. So, where did that leave a nobleman plotting a political alliance, or a guildmaster protecting a trade secret? It left them in the shadows, needing a system that was invisible, silent, and utterly dependable. This desperate need for discretion is what gave birth to the whisper networks, a hidden architecture built not of stone, but of trust and cleverness. These networks were the lifeblood of clandestine communication, a silent web woven through the very fabric of society. To understand them, you must first forget the idea of a formal organization with membership rolls or meeting halls. A whisper network was something far more fluid and organic. It was an informal, often secretive channel, a constellation of trusted individuals connected by shared interests, loyalties, or dangerous secrets that needed protection. Imagine it not as a single chain, but as a spider's web. A tremor on one silken thread, a whispered piece of intelligence, could be felt across the entire structure, alerting everyone connected to it. Who were the people in this web? They were the courtiers exchanging a knowing glance in a crowded throne room, the diplomats sharing a private word after a public negotiation, and the merchants who understood that some news was too valuable to be shouted in the marketplace. They were the artisans who passed a message along with a delivered order, and perhaps most crucially, the servants who moved unseen through castle corridors, privy to conversations their masters believed were private. The term whisper is perfectly chosen. It describes the literal, hushed tone used to pass a message where walls might have ears, but it also captures the entire ethos of these exchanges, subtle, indirect, and designed to leave no trace. The entire system operated on a fragile but powerful foundation of trust and reciprocity. Sharing a secret created a bond, but it also created shared risk. This mutual vulnerability was the glue that held the network together, ensuring that members protected one another because their own safety depended on it. This hidden layer of communication existed just beneath the surface of every royal court, every bustling city, and every trade route, allowing vital information to flow where official messengers dared not tread. Trust was the ultimate currency in this silent trade, and the human messenger was its most vital instrument. These were not simple letter carriers, but carefully chosen agents whose very survival depended on their discretion and resourcefulness. A noble family or a powerful guild would select their messengers based on unwavering loyalty, a sharp mind, and an intimate knowledge of the land. They were the living, breathing threads that stitched the Whisper network together across vast and dangerous distances. Some were professional couriers, sworn to a specific household and trained from a young age in the arts of evasion and observation. Others were monks, whose religious robes offered a veil of sanctity, and whose monasteries served as waystations along well-traveled routes. Pilgrims, minstrels, and merchants also played this role, their constant journeys providing the perfect excuse to move between towns and castles without raising suspicion. The most skilled messengers rarely carried written notes. Instead, they committed entire conversations, troop numbers, or treaty terms to memory, delivering them verbatim days or weeks later. This practice, called bearing oral messages, eliminated any physical evidence that could be discovered by an enemy patrol or a rival lord's guard. Imagine the mental fortitude required to hold a secret that could start a war or save a city, all while navigating bandit-infested forests and crossing treacherous rivers. These couriers perfected the art of blending in. A minstrel's lute might conceal a hollow compartment, but his true weapon was a catchy ballad whose lyrics contained coded instructions. A pilgrim's staff and humble attire masked a sharp mind cataloging every detail of a fortress's defenses. They moved through the world as ghosts, their true purpose hidden behind a carefully constructed identity. Their success or failure determined the fate of alliances, the outcome of rebellions, and the very balance of power. Without these resilient individuals, the Whisper network was just an idea, a phantom. They gave it legs, a voice, and a memory, turning whispers into actions that shaped history from the shadows. But even the most loyal messenger faced one undeniable risk: the spoken word itself. A whispered secret, overheard by the wrong person, could unravel everything. This vulnerability forced the Whisper networks to evolve beyond mere whispers, developing a second layer of protection, an entire secret language hidden within plain speech. Guilds were masters of this art. A conversation between two master craftsmen about the quality of wool or the price of silver might sound like mundane business, but to an initiated member of the guild, it was a precise code. A phrase like "the northern wool is of poor quality this season" could actually mean the northern trade route is compromised by bandits. The market for silver is falling might secretly warn that a rival guild is undercutting their prices. This specialized jargon, known only to members, created an impenetrable shield around their operations, allowing them to discuss sensitive matters in crowded taverns or open markets without fear of discovery. Similarly, religious minorities facing persecution developed intricate theological codes. A seemingly orthodox prayer or a comment on a biblical passage could contain a heretical message or announce the time and place of a secret gathering. To an outside observer, it was piety, but to the initiated, it was a survival manual spoken aloud. Perhaps the most elegant and deceptive system grew from the courtly love traditions. In the highly formalized atmosphere of the royal court, where every glance and gesture was scrutinized, nobles used the language of romance to mask political intrigue. A poem praising a lady's beauty delivered publicly by a troubadour might secretly detail the movement of troops using metaphors of storms and shields. A gift of a specific flower could signal assent to a treasonous plot. The very artifice of courtly life became the perfect camouflage for the Whisper network, allowing conspirators to exchange vital intelligence in the throne room itself, hidden in a sonnet. These linguistic codes required no hidden compartments or invisible ink, just a shared understanding between sender and receiver. This made them incredibly resilient. You cannot confiscate a memory or intercept a meaning known only to two people. The system was a testament to human ingenuity, proving that the most secure channel is not a hidden path, but a public conversation that only a select few can truly understand. Beyond the subtleties of coded speech lay an even more ingenious layer of security, one that turned the entire medieval world into a living message board. These were symbolic communication systems where ordinary objects, art, and heraldry whispered secrets to those who knew how to look. A merchant arranging bolts of cloth on his stall was not just creating an attractive display, he was sending a signal. The specific pattern of colors and textures could warn fellow traders of an incoming tax inspector, signal that a shipment of spices had been lost at sea, or indicate a shift in political loyalties within the local lord's court. For those in the know, the marketplace buzzed with a silent conversation conducted entirely through the placement of goods. Within the stone walls of a noble's castle, the grand tapestries hanging in the great hall served a dual purpose. To most guests, they were simply displays of wealth and artistic skill, depicting heroic battles or pastoral scenes. But to a visiting ally or a conspirator, a specific figure in the weave, the color of a knight's plume, or the presence of a particular flower could convey a critical message. It might be a warning that the host was under suspicion, an invitation to a secret meeting at midnight, or a declaration that a planned rebellion was still underway. This visual code transformed the entire household into a dynamic and secure briefing document, its contents changing with the hanging of a new tapestry. Even the soaring arches and stained glass of cathedrals could hold hidden meanings for initiated groups. A seemingly standard religious scene might include a symbol known only to a particular guild or a persecuted sect, marking the building as a safe haven or pointing the way to hidden texts. Heraldry, the system of coats of arms, evolved into a particularly powerful and rapid symbolic language. A knight's shield was his identity, but small, deliberate changes to that design could broadcast news across a battlefield or a kingdom without a single word being spoken. A slight alteration in the border pattern, a change in the position of a beast, or the addition of a tiny, specific symbol could announce a broken alliance, the death of a lord, or an urgent call to arms. These signals could be understood at a distance, relayed from castle to castle faster than any rider. The entire visual landscape of the Middle Ages, from the humblest market stall to the most majestic cathedral, was alive with this secret dialogue. For the vast majority of people, it was just the background of daily life. But for those woven into the Whisper network, the world itself was speaking, sharing its most guarded secrets in a language of symbols, patterns, and silent gestures. Yet for all their cleverness, symbolic codes and memorized messages had one great limitation. They could not convey complex, lengthy instructions or permanent records. When the stakes were highest and the information too vast for any single mind to carry, the Whisper networks turned to the written word, but in ways designed to make the message itself disappear. They mastered the art of concealed writing. The most common trick was invisible ink crafted from simple, everyday substances. A diplomat could write a detailed report using nothing but lemon juice or milk. To any observer, the page was blank, a worthless scrap of parchment. But when warmed gently over a candle flame, the organic compounds would caramelize, and the secret text would materialize in a faint brown script, as if summoned by magic from the empty page. This was the perfect tool for a spy, carrying a seemingly innocent letter that held its true meaning just out of sight. For those needing to hide a message in plain view, there was micrography, the art of miniature writing. Scribes, often within the safety of monasteries, could inscribe an entire letter along the stem of a painted flower in an illuminated manuscript, or tuck a list of names into the elaborate swirls of a single capital letter. An enemy searching for intelligence would see only a beautiful prayer book, completely missing the treasonous text woven into the decoration. When even that was too risky, correspondents turned to ciphers. They developed systems where each letter of the alphabet was systematically replaced by another according to a prearranged pattern. A message might look like a jumble of nonsense, utterly secure unless one possessed the key, a small code book or a memorized sequence that could unscramble the truth. Another method, steganography, hid messages within entirely innocent texts. A boring merchant's invoice about the price of grain and livestock could contain a secret report on troop movements, with every third word forming the real communication. The physical concealment of these messages showed equal ingenuity. Spies used hollowed-out book covers, false bottoms in wax-sealed containers, and even walking sticks with secret compartments in the handle. A message could be rolled into a tiny scroll and inserted into a hollow ring or a pendant, carried openly as jewelry. Each of these methods reveals a world where trust was perpetually tested, and the protection of a secret required not just loyalty, but a profound capacity for deception. The written word, usually a permanent record, became as fleeting and deniable as a whisper and just as powerful. While the tools of deception were vital, they needed a vast and trusted system to carry them across the known world. That system was already in place, woven into the spiritual and political landscape of the age. Monasteries and convents stood as silent, powerful nodes in the medieval whisper network. Their stone walls offered more than just prayer. They provided the perfect infrastructure for clandestine communication. Spread across every kingdom, these religious houses were interconnected islands of relative safety and autonomy. A monk traveling from a monastery in France to one in Germany was not a suspicious figure. He was a man on God's business, his movements blessed by the church and largely free from the interference of local lords. This perceived neutrality was their greatest asset. A nobleman's messenger could be stopped and searched, but a Benedictine brother carrying a sealed letter from his abbot was often granted immediate passage. Inside these sacred walls, the scriptorium, that quiet room dedicated to copying holy texts, frequently doubled as a secret communications hub. Scribes with exceptional linguistic skills did not just illuminate psalms. They crafted complex ciphers for political allies or used the art of micrography to hide treasonous messages within the decorative borders of a seemingly innocent manuscript. The very act of writing, a skill concentrated within the church, became a tool of statecraft and conspiracy. Pilgrimage routes functioned as protected travel corridors. A spy could not easily explain a journey from England to Rome, but a pilgrim could. Under the guise of religious devotion, messengers moved along these well-trodden paths, carrying intelligence in their minds or concealed among their humble belongings, shielded by the public respect for their sacred mission. The international structure of major orders created a ready-made network that transcended borders and languages. A Cistercian monk from England could find shelter, trust, and immediate assistance from a Cistercian brother in Italy, bound by a shared rule and a loyalty that sometimes superseded their duty to earthly kings. This made the transfer of sensitive information across enemy territories not just possible, but surprisingly efficient. Furthermore, religious houses served as ideal neutral ground for secret meetings. Rival factions or negotiating diplomats could meet within the refectory or cloister garden, their conversations muffled by chanting and prayer, all under the ancient protection of sanctuary which forbade violence on holy ground. The Church's own extensive diplomatic connections and its legal immunity from many secular laws made bishops and abbots perfect intermediaries in the most delicate of negotiations. It is no wonder that savvy plotters and rulers deliberately placed loyal clergy within these networks, using the cloak of faith to protect the machinations of power. The Whisper Network did not just use the Church, it became a part of it, a hidden current flowing through the same channels that carried the Word of God. While monasteries provided a sacred shield for secrets, the bustling world of commerce built its own sprawling information empire. Merchant guilds and trading families developed the most extensive and efficient whisper networks of the Middle Ages, turning profit and information into two sides of the same coin. Their survival depended on knowing which trade routes were safe, which ports had new tariffs, and which rulers were stable. This commercial necessity made them the unsung architects of a global intelligence system, long before the word had a modern meaning. The Hanseatic League, a powerful alliance of German merchant towns, operated a sophisticated communication web that stretched from London deep into the Russian city of Novgorod. Their trading posts, known as contours, were far more than warehouses. They were nerve centers for collecting and relaying news. A letter between Hanseatic merchants discussing the price of timber and fur in Riga might secretly contain coded observations about the political mood of the Lithuanian court or the movement of Danish warships. Their business correspondence, carried on fast courier ships across the Baltic and North Seas, was the lifeblood of their power, and they guarded its contents with ruthless efficiency. Further south, the great Italian banking families perfected this art. The Medici of Florence, for instance, did not just move money, they moved information. Their branch offices in Venice, Bruges, and Lyon were ears to the ground, gathering financial gossip and political rumors with equal diligence. A Medici agent in London might send a seemingly routine report on wool prices to the head office, but hidden within the dry figures could be a warning about a looming royal debt default or the health of the English king. They understood that a war in Burgundy could crash the market for Italian silk, and that a papal decree could affect interest rates across the continent. For them, a secret was a financial instrument as tangible as a gold florin. The very ships that carried spices and silks were also floating vaults of intelligence. A ship's captain's log, a record of weather and course, could hold encrypted notes about pirate activity or the fortifications of a rival port, written in a cipher known only to the ship's owner. Cargo manifests were often works of fiction, their coded entries masking the true nature of a shipment or the identities of the high-ranking individuals who owned it. And then there were the great trade fairs, the medieval equivalent of a global summit. In the chaotic, vibrant markets of Champagne or Frankfurt, merchants from a dozen different lands would gather. Amid the haggling over wool and wine, a quiet word exchanged between trusted associates could carry news of a revolution in Sicily or a new trade route opening in the Black Sea. These fairs were information clearinghouses where rumors were weighed like gold and a well-timed secret could secure a fortune. In this world, a merchant's success was not just measured in the goods he sold, but in the quality of the whispers he heard. His network was his net worth. A court musician plucking a lute string could signal more than just the start of a melody. Minstrels, troubadours, and traveling performers were the roaming broadcast towers of the medieval whisper network, their art providing the perfect camouflage for clandestine communication. Their role was uniquely powerful because they operated in plain sight. their entertainment value granting them a passport across guarded castle gates and into crowded public squares where others would be viewed with suspicion. A troubadour performing a new ballad about a knight's undying love for a distant lady might, to the uninitiated, be a simple romance, but to a specific nobleman in the audience, the mention of a red rose blooming in the north could be a clear signal that northern allies were ready to move, while the description of a storm gathering over the sea might warn of an approaching naval fleet. The entire structure of courtly love poetry, with its elaborate metaphors and accepted secrecy, was a pre-built framework for hiding political and military intelligence in beautiful verse. The performance itself added another layer of security, a subtle pause on a specific word, a seemingly accidental repetition of a musical phrase, or a particular gesture made while singing could be the real trigger for action, elements impossible to capture in a written intercept and easy for the performer to deny as mere artistic flourish. Traveling theatre troupes employed similar tricks, weaving coded dialogue into the raucous lines of a morality play, or using a specific prop handled in a certain way to contact a local agent in the crowd. These performers were not just messengers, they were intelligence gatherers as well. A minstrel was expected to carry news and gossip, making him the ideal person to listen without arousing suspicion. He could travel from a rebellious baron's castle to the king's court, collecting details about morale and fortifications under the guise of learning new songs to perform, then encode that information into his next composition for his true patron. Their mobility was their greatest asset, allowing them to connect nodes of the whisper network that were otherwise separated by social class and geography. While a royal messenger moved with official purpose, a performer drifted on the currents of popular demand, a ghost in the colorful attire of an artist, turning every song, every poem, and every play into a potential vehicle for secrets that shaped the fate of kingdoms. Even the very stones of a medieval city could speak for those who knew how to listen. Architectural design and urban layouts were not merely functional or decorative. They were active, silent participants in the whisper network, providing a permanent and deniable infrastructure for secrets. Cathedrals, those towering monuments to faith, often housed a remarkable acoustic secret, the Whispering Gallery. A curved stone wall or a specific vaulted dome could carry the faintest murmur along its surface, allowing two people standing far apart to hold a completely private conversation in the middle of a bustling, echoing church. To any observer, they were simply pious visitors, but they were exchanging information as securely as if they were in a locked room, their words hidden by the very grandeur of their surroundings. Within the private residences of the powerful, the architecture of secrecy was even more deliberate. Noble castles and townhouses were frequently riddled with hidden passages concealed behind tapestries, rotating bookcases, and false walls. These were not just escape routes, they were listening posts and private corridors. A lord could move unseen from his chambers to a hidden alcove overlooking the great hall, eavesdropping on his guests' unguarded conversations. Or he could use a secret stairwell to bring a trusted ally into a concealed room, a place where no servant could accidentally overhear and no spy could easily penetrate, ensuring that the most sensitive plans were discussed within the very bones of the building. The city itself was a map for the initiated, a seemingly random crack in a specific building's foundation, a unique carving on a cornerstone, or a particular arrangement of bricks could serve as an inconspicuous signpost. For a messenger new to a city or an agent operating in hostile territory, these subtle markers were a lifeline, guiding them to a safe house, a sympathetic guild, or a hidden drop point without the need for risky verbal inquiries. The guilds, masters of their trades, extended their coded language into their very headquarters. The position of a lantern in a guild hall window, the specific pattern of flags flown on a feast day, or even the arrangement of goods in the central market square could broadcast clear messages to members. A flag flown at half-mast might not mean a death but a sudden tax inspection. A normally bustling stall left conspicuously empty could be a warning to avoid the area, that the merchant had been arrested or that rival agents were watching. The entire urban landscape, from the soaring cathedral to the humblest street corner, was integrated into this system of silent signals. This transformed the city from a mere backdrop of stone and timber into a living, breathing entity that collaborated with the Whisper network. An outsider saw only architecture and commerce, but an insider navigated a world alive with hidden meaning, where every building, every street, and every public space could be a partner in secrecy. Behind the thick stone walls of a manor house, the real business of power was often conducted not in the council chamber, but in the kitchen and the great hall. The domestic sphere, with its rhythms of daily life, offered a perfect veil for the Whisper network, turning the most ordinary activities into a sophisticated communication system. Servants were the invisible sentinels of this world. A chambermaid dusting a lord's study could memorize the contents of an unsealed letter left on a desk. A stable boy overhearing a visiting nobleman's complaints to his valet could relay vital intelligence about that lord's loyalties. These men and women moved through private spaces with an access their masters rarely considered, their observations flowing silently through the back corridors and servant quarters to allies outside the walls. The kitchen itself became a command center of coded signals. The head cook was not just preparing a feast, he was orchestrating a flow of information. The specific dishes served to guests could convey complex messages. A boar's head presented with an apple in its mouth might signal that all was well, while the same dish served with a lemon could be a covert warning of danger. The arrangement of the salt cellar on the high table, the number of courses presented, even the type of bread baked for a specific visitor could indicate their trustworthiness or the urgency of a situation. This culinary code allowed the entire household to be alerted without a single suspicious word being uttered in the Great Hall. Within this domestic web, women wielded exceptional influence. While often excluded from formal councils, noblewomen managed vast households and maintained wide-ranging correspondence under the guise of social letters. A letter discussing family health, the management of estates, or the marriage prospects of a cousin could easily contain coded phrases about political alliances or the movement of troops. Through their network of visits and gift-giving, they could transport sealed messages or pass verbal instructions with a discretion that male agents, constantly watched, could rarely match. The tradition of hospitality provided the final, crucial link. A chain of trusted homes functioned as a series of safe houses stretching across the countryside. A traveler carrying a secret would not need to risk an inn where curious ears listened in the common room. Instead, he would arrive at the gate of a sympathetic household, offering a prearranged phrase or a specific token. He would be given food, shelter, and most importantly, a secure environment to receive his next instructions or pass on his information before continuing his journey at first light. The entire domestic world, from the bustling kitchen to the quiet solar where the lady of the house wrote her letters, hummed with this silent activity. It was a network built on the profound trust of shared daily life, proving that sometimes the most powerful secrets are not whispered in dark alleyways, but passed between trusted friends over a shared meal in a warm, well-lit hall. A shepherd on a distant hilltop could send a message across a valley without a single shout. By moving his flock into a specific formation, perhaps a long line or a tight circle, he could signal to a watching counterpart miles away that soldiers were on the road or that a tax collector had entered the village. His crook, raised at a certain angle or tapped against a rock in a distinct rhythm, became a silent language understood only by those woven into the rural whisper network. In the vast, open countryside where a lone rider attracted immediate attention, these agricultural signals offered a form of communication that was invisible to the untrained eye. The entire calendar of farming life provided a perfect structure for secret exchanges. A community that planted its wheat field a week later than usual might not be lazy, but was instead signaling to allied villages that a planned rebellion was delayed. The sudden, coordinated movement of livestock from one pasture to another could be a covert warning for nearby communities to prepare for a raid, disguised as simple animal husbandry. The village miller, a central figure who processed every family's grain, held a position of immense strategic power. As farmers brought their sacks to be ground, the miller could pass along verbal messages with the returned flour, his mill acting as a clearinghouse for local news and intelligence. He knew everyone, and his constant, legitimate interactions made him an ideal and unsuspected node in the information web. Seasonal gatherings were the highlights of this rural network. A harvest festival or a spring fair, with its noise, music, and crowds, created a bubble of controlled chaos where information could change hands freely. A whispered sentence during a lively dance, a folded note passed along with a payment for a new plow, or a specific pattern woven into a garland of flowers could carry vital news under the thick cover of celebration. These agricultural networks were incredibly difficult to dismantle because they had no central leader and no physical headquarters. They were the land itself, speaking through the routines of daily survival. An invading army would see only farmers tending their fields and shepherds minding their sheep, completely unaware that the landscape around them was alive with silent conversation, coordinating a resistance as old as the soil they stood on. The rolling sea itself became a vast, open page for the whisper network. Coastal communities and maritime traders, living at the mercy of the waves and winds, developed a language all their own, one that land-based authorities could scarcely begin to decipher. A fisherman's choice of which cove to use for mending his nets was not always about the weather. It could be a silent report on the presence of a foreign warship just beyond the horizon. By altering the configuration of his sails, perhaps raising a smaller jib alongside the mainsail, he could send a clear, immediate signal to a watcher on the cliff above. That lone figure, appearing to simply enjoy the sea air, would note the pattern and carry the warning inland, long before any official messenger could gallop from the port. Even the lighthouse, that steadfast guardian against disaster, could be turned to a different purpose. A keeper loyal to a local lord or a smuggling ring could subtly change the timing of the light's rotation, creating a distinct sequence of flashes that identified his allies' ships and warned away their enemies. To any other vessel, it was a beacon of safety, but to those in the know, it was a targeted message blinking across the dark water. In the organized chaos of a bustling port, every action carried a potential double meaning. Harbor masters and the guilds of dockworkers operated a sophisticated, unspoken code. The specific dock a ship was assigned to, the order in which its cargo was unloaded, even the breaks taken by the stevedores could broadcast vital intelligence. A merchant vessel moored at the far eastern pier might indicate that its owner was out of favor with the ruling council. A delay in unloading certain barrels could signal that the customs inspectors were on high alert and that a different, more discreet method of moving goods was required. This intricate dance of labor and logistics allowed the entire port to function as a living intelligence bulletin, its news read not in words but in the physical rhythm of work. For smugglers and pirates, whose very survival depended on invisibility, these coastal signals were a matter of life and death. they transformed the most mundane domestic scenes into a secure alert system. The pattern of laundry hung out to dry on a coastal cottage's line, the specific number of shirts or the color of a blanket could indicate whether the coast was clear for a landing or if revenue agents were lying in wait. A series of bonfires lit along a deserted stretch of beach was not a celebration, but a precise map of safe landing zones and danger points, readable for miles by a ship running dark. A fishing boat that ventured out to a specific, unproductive reef at an odd hour was not seeking a catch, but was instead a floating meeting room, its crew exchanging information with a passing galley under the guise of checking their nets. These maritime networks created an early warning system that was incredibly resilient. How could a king's soldier arrest a cliff for being windy or confiscate the pattern of the waves? The sea guarded its secrets well, allowing whispers to travel on the salt spray, coordinating everything from trade to treason beyond the reach of any crown. A dog's bark could be far more than a simple alarm. Across the whisper networks of the Middle Ages, animals of all kinds became willing, if unwitting, allies in the silent trade of secrets. Their natural behaviors and the everyday bonds they shared with humans provided a perfect, unsuspicious channel for communication, one that was nearly impossible for outsiders to detect or intercept. The most famous of these animal messengers was the homing pigeon. Capable of finding its way back to its loft across hundreds of miles, a single bird could carry a tiny, tightly rolled parchment. While a human courier might be questioned, robbed, or waylaid, a pigeon flew in a direct line over impassable terrain and hostile territory, its journey appearing as nothing more than a bird in flight to any observer below. This provided a speed and reliability for urgent messages that no earthly road could ever match, but the animal network extended far beyond the skies. The noble art of falconry offered a brilliant public excuse for private meetings. Two lords who wished to converse without attracting notice could arrange to hunt together. As their falcons wheeled overhead, the handlers on the ground, often trusted agents themselves, could exchange information while seemingly focused only on the bird's training and care. The transfer of a prized gerfalcon from one noble to another could itself be the signal that sealed a pact, its value masking the true transaction taking place. On a more humble scale, the loyal family dog was a versatile sentinel, a shepherd's dog trained to bark at a stranger in a certain way, perhaps with 3 sharp yelps instead of a continuous growl, could differentiate between a lost traveler and a band of raiders. Within a castle courtyard, a specific command could send a hound to a particular individual, its presence at their side a silent signal to attend a secret meeting or to be on alert. Even livestock played a role in this rural intelligence system. A farmer could arrange his sheep in a specific formation on a hillside, a pattern visible for miles that signaled safety or danger to neighboring villages. A distinctive mark painted on the flank of a cow being driven to market could tell watching allies which trade route was currently safe or which official was to be avoided. These methods were brilliant because they were so ordinary. The movement of animals was a constant, unremarkable part of medieval life, making it the ideal camouflage for a message. An enemy agent would note a knight flying his hawk or a farmer tending his flock and see only what was expected. He would remain completely blind to the silent conversation happening right before his eyes, a dialogue conducted not with words but with barks, wing beats, and the simple, trusting presence of creatures who knew nothing of the secrets they carried. The hushed debates of a university lecture hall could mask a conspiracy against a king. Within the great centers of learning, from Bologna to Oxford to Paris, a different kind of whisper network thrived, one built not on commerce or domestic trust, but on the pursuit of knowledge itself. The medieval university was a truly international institution, a crossroads where students and masters from every corner of Europe gathered. This created a protected travel corridor for information. A young man journeying from Germany to study law in Italy was not a suspicious traveler. He was a scholar on a respected path. His satchel, filled with books and parchments, could easily conceal a letter from a German prince to an Italian ally, all shielded by the perceived innocence of academic pursuit. The Latin language, the common tongue of all educated men, became a perfect cipher. A dense philosophical argument about the nature of divine will or a complex commentary on an ancient text could be laced with coded political messages. To a local official monitoring correspondence, it was just scholarly gibberish, but to the intended recipient, a fellow intellectual, the real meaning was clear as day. A critique of a long-dead Roman emperor's policies might actually be a scathing indictment of the current pope or a call for political reform, hidden safely within a web of academic abstraction. University libraries, those treasure houses of knowledge, doubled as secure drop points. A specific book could be deliberately misfiled, its presence on the wrong shelf signaling that a message was waiting. Or the margins of a common theological text might contain annotations, seemingly just a student's notes, but which actually formed a complete and secret report when read in sequence by an initiated eye. The very structure of academic life provided cover for these exchanges. The formal practice of disputation, a public debate on a set topic, was a particularly brilliant tool. Two scholars could engage in a fiery, public argument over a point of philosophy, their shouted points and counterpoints thrilling the audience. Yet within the rigid structure of their logical propositions, they could be exchanging vital intelligence, using pre-arranged phrases and examples to convey everything from troop movements to the names of traitors, all under the brilliant glare of public scrutiny. This scholarly network was especially vital for transmitting dangerous ideas, the kind that challenged the power of kings or bishops. The specialized language and complex logic created a barrier that few outside the academic world could penetrate, protecting radical thoughts as they traveled from one great mind to another, carried by students who were the unsuspecting vessels for secrets that could reshape the world. A single whispered lie could topple a king faster than any army. The deliberate cultivation of rumor and gossip was the whisper network's most subtle and volatile weapon, a form of communication that was impossible to control once released into the wild. Unlike a sealed letter or a coded message, a rumor had no single author. It was a ghost born in the shadows and given life by the very people who repeated it. Courtiers were the master gardeners of this treacherous field. They would plant a seed of gossip in the fertile soil of the royal court, perhaps a hushed suggestion that a certain duke was secretly negotiating with a foreign power. They did not need to prove it, they only needed the story to be compelling enough to spread on its own. Soon, the rumor would be on every tongue, from the highest noble to the lowest scullion, eroding the duke's credibility and influence long before any formal accusation could be made. This was political warfare waged with nothing but air and implication. In the marketplace, gossip was an early warning system with a life of its own. A merchant hearing a casual comment about the king's poor health at the wool stall would not just hear a piece of trivia, he would hear a signal to shift his investments, sensing the economic instability that would follow a succession crisis. A sudden, widespread story about pirates infesting a trade route, whether true or not, could cause insurance rates to soar and send entire merchant fleets on different courses, all based on a narrative crafted by a rival to manipulate the market. The genius of this method lay in its perfect deniability. If a planted rumor caused a rival's downfall, the originator could simply shrug and say they had heard it from someone else. There was no parchment to intercept, no messenger to interrogate. The rumor simply existed, a self-replicating idea that traveled on the breath of 1,000 unwitting carriers. Managing this volatile tool required a deep understanding of human nature and social dynamics. The most skilled operators knew exactly which servant was the biggest gossip, which minstrel could weave a story into a catchy song, and which market vendor had the ear of the entire guild. Timing was everything. Releasing a damaging story too soon could allow the target to mount a defense, while releasing it too late would miss the critical moment. The goal was never to state a truth, but to create a perception, to shape reality itself through the relentless, invisible pressure of what everyone was saying. It was a dangerous game, for a rumor could easily spiral out of control and burn its creator, but when wielded with precision, it was the most powerful and untraceable message of all. A sealed diplomatic pouch carried two sets of truths. On the surface were the formal letters, the public pronouncements, and the official requests that constituted the business between kings. But tucked beside them, or more often carried only in the ambassador's memory, were the real messages, the whispers that shaped the fate of nations. Ambassadors and their envoys were the masters of this double game. Their official residence in a foreign court was not just a place of negotiation. It was a listening post, a hub for a clandestine network that operated in the shadows of their public duties. The tradition of diplomatic immunity was their greatest asset, a sacred shield that protected their persons and their correspondence from search or seizure. A local baron could not arrest the ambassador from France on a whim, and no guard could rip open the sealed pouch destined for the French king. This legal protection created a superhighway for secrets, a channel that was both official and utterly deniable. Along these protected routes, information flowed that no ordinary messenger would dare to carry: details of troop deployments, the private weaknesses of a prince, or the tentative terms of a secret alliance. Marriage alliances wove the most durable threads into this web. When a princess from England was sent to marry the King of Castile, she did not travel alone. She arrived with her own court, her own confessor, her own ladies-in-waiting, all of whom remained loyal to her and her homeland. This new queen became a permanent node in a whisper network that stretched across the Pyrenees. Her letters home, filled with familial news and concerns, could easily contain coded assessments of her husband's treasury, his rivalries with neighboring lords, or the morale of his armies. The family connection provided a perfect, ongoing pretext for communication, a channel that political shifts could not easily sever. The complex dance of diplomacy itself was a festival of hidden signals. A gift of rare jewels from one king to another was not merely a gesture of goodwill. The type of gem, its setting, even the box it came in, could convey a specific message to the initiated recipient. A negotiation over a border dispute held in a lavish garden, away from the scribes and the council, allowed for the real bargaining to occur, where true demands and secret concessions could be whispered between the principal players without any official record. The sheer volume of official traffic provided the perfect camouflage. An ambassador sending a weekly report was not suspicious. He was merely doing his job. But within that routine dispatch, written in a complex cipher, could be the blueprint for a surprise military campaign or the name of a traitor within the host court's inner circle. His staff, the junior diplomats and translators, were his eyes and ears, gathering gossip from servants and minor officials, building a mosaic of intelligence from 1,000 unguarded moments. These diplomatic networks were the nervous system of international power, allowing allies to move in concert across vast distances and enabling rulers to peer into the councils of their rivals. They turned the formal, public world of treaties and royal greetings into a mask, behind which the true, silent business of empire was conducted with a whisper and a nod. A master craftsman's most valuable possession was not a tool, but a secret. The intricate techniques for making stained glass that glowed like heaven, the precise formula for a steel that would not shatter in battle, the complex patterns known only to a specific tapestry workshop, these were the crown jewels of the medieval craft guild. Protecting this knowledge was not just about profit, it was about survival in a fiercely competitive world, and this desperate need for secrecy forged some of the most resilient whisper networks of the age. These guilds turned their entire profession into a coded language, the specialized jargon of a trade, incomprehensible to an outsider, was their first line of defense. A conversation between two master masons about the load-bearing quality of a specific quarry's stone might sound like a technical discussion, but to an initiated brother, it was a warning about that quarry's owner being in debt to a rival lord. The very signs hanging outside their workshops, a glove for a leatherworker, a wheel for a cartwright, could be subtly altered. A crack painted deliberately in a potter's sign might indicate that the local bishop's agents were asking too many questions, a silent alert to every guildsman who passed by. Even their tools could speak. A blacksmith might file a unique, identifying mark into his hammer, a symbol that, when impressed into a finished sword or piece of armor, authenticated it for other guild members across the continent. This mark could also serve as a signature of trust on a secret message, verifying the sender's identity without a single written word. The entire workshop, from the placement of benches to the specific order of tasks, could be arranged to signal safety or danger to any visiting member who knew what to look for. This silent communication system stretched across Europe, woven together by the ancient tradition of the journey. After his initial training, a young apprentice was expected to travel, moving from one master's workshop to another in distant cities to learn new methods. This was the perfect cover. Under the guise of perfecting his craft, a journeyman could carry verbal messages, technical diagrams hidden among his personal drawings, or even tiny, encoded samples of new alloys or dyes. He was a mobile node in the guild's intelligence network, his legitimate wanderings providing a constant, renewable flow of information between chapters. He would know the secret handshakes, the coded phrases, and the safe houses in every town with a guild hall, ensuring he could always find shelter and a secure channel for communication. The guild hall itself was a fortress of secrets. Its architecture often included hidden rooms behind great fireplaces, listening galleries overlooking the main meeting chamber, and cellars with concealed entrances. During a loud and raucous guild feast, a small group could slip away into one of these spaces to hold a meeting completely shielded from prying ears. The hall's strongboxes did not just hold the guild's treasury, they protected its most precious asset, the secret recipe books and technical manuals, often written in a guild-specific cipher that looked like nonsense to any thief. The economic power these guilds wielded gave their whisper networks remarkable independence. A king might desire to control the flow of information in his realm, but he could not easily threaten the guild of armorers who supplied his army, or the glassmakers building his magnificent cathedral. These craftsmen held a monopoly on essential skills, and their networks were protected by the very dependence that rulers and bishops had on their work. The silent language of the craftsmen ensured that a revolutionary glassmaking technique from Venice could find its way to a workshop in Paris, or that a warning about an oppressive new tax could travel from London to Ghent faster than any royal decree, all hidden within the humble, everyday world of work. A pilgrim's staff and scallop shell were far more than symbols of faith. They were passports on the greatest information highway of the Middle Ages, the sprawling network of pilgrimage routes, particularly the famed Camino de Santiago, functioned as protected corridors where spiritual devotion and clandestine communication walked hand in hand. A pilgrim enjoyed a unique status, granted certain legal protections and a right to hospitality that an ordinary traveler could not claim. To harm or hinder a pilgrim was a sin and often a crime, making their journey one of the safest ways to move across a fractured and dangerous continent. This sacred mobility was the Whisper Network's dream. A spy might struggle to explain a journey from Germany to Spain, but a pilgrim needed no explanation. Their motive was understood and respected by all. The roads to Rome, Canterbury, and Santiago became bustling channels where news from every corner of Europe flowed as steadily as the rivers they crossed. At the great pilgrimage sites themselves, an international crowd gathered. In the shadow of St. Peter's Basilica or within the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, a noble from England could casually converse with a merchant from Genoa, sharing intelligence under the sacred pretense of shared devotion. The constant, massive flow of people made these sites ideal for dropping off or picking up messages without anyone noticing a single suspicious meeting. Pilgrim badges, those cheap, mass-produced tokens sold to prove one had completed the journey, were perfect tools for this silent trade. A badge of St. James might appear perfectly ordinary, but a closer look could reveal a tiny, deliberate flaw in the saint's hat or a unique arrangement of dots on his staff, a coded marking that authenticated the bearer to a contact in the next town. Some badges were even crafted with hidden compartments, their hollow backs capable of holding a tightly rolled sliver of parchment. A pilgrim could wear his secret in plain sight, pinned to his cloak for all to see, yet completely invisible to anyone who did not know what to look for. The entire system was shielded by a powerful moral cover. A king's agent might hesitate to search a pilgrim too roughly, fearing both public outrage and divine retribution. A local lord was often duty-bound to offer shelter to these holy travelers, providing safe houses that required no subterfuge. This allowed messengers to operate with a freedom that was otherwise unimaginable, carrying sensitive political information or military dispatches under the impeccable disguise of religious fervor. The Whisper Network did not just use these routes, it sanctified them, turning the paths of the faithful into the most secure and far-reaching communication lines of the age. A community facing constant threat learns to speak without making a sound. Across the scattered landscape of medieval Europe, Jewish diaspora networks perfected the art of silent survival, building a communication web of breathtaking sophistication and resilience. Dispersed and often persecuted, these communities turned their very dispersion into a strength, weaving a clandestine information system through the durable threads of trade, family, and faith. Jewish merchants operating across Christian and Muslim lands were the network's primary couriers. Their constant travels between ports and market towns provided the physical pathways for messages to flow. They developed intricate commercial codes and double-entry bookkeeping systems that did more than track money. They could conceal the movement of people, warn of unsafe routes, or signal shifts in local political tides. A bill of exchange from a banker in Cairo to his counterpart in Marseille was not just a financial instrument. It was a trusted, sealed container for intelligence that secular or religious authorities could not easily decipher. The deepest roots of this network, however, lay in religious scholarship, the system of responsa, where leading rabbis would provide written answers to complex legal and ethical questions from communities hundreds of miles away, established a continuous, legitimate, and protected channel for correspondence. A lengthy scroll discussing the intricacies of kosher slaughter or marital law could travel openly, its sanctity often deterring interference. Yet, hidden within its dense Hebrew script or woven into its complex arguments, could be a warning about a rising tide of local violence or instructions for aiding a family fleeing persecution. This scholarly exchange created a living, breathing nervous system that connected a community in York to one in Toledo, allowing them to act as a single entity in the face of danger. When a pogrom erupted in one city, this network would hum with urgent life. Coded messages flew along trade routes, often carried by merchants altering their travel plans at a moment's notice. Funds would be mobilized through trusted banking connections to support refugees. Safe houses, often the homes of other Jewish families or sympathetic clients, would be alerted through subtle signals, perhaps a specific mark on a doorpost or a particular item left in a shop window. This ability to rapidly share information and coordinate a response was a matter of literal life and death, transforming a collection of vulnerable minorities into a mutually supportive alliance that spanned continents. In a world that often sought to isolate and destroy them, these diaspora networks became a shield, proving that the most powerful whispers are those born not from power, but from an unbreakable will to endure. A physician's bag could carry more than just herbs and potions. Healers, surgeons, and apothecaries occupied a uniquely trusted space in the medieval world, their mission of mercy granting them a passport across battle lines and into the private chambers of both peasant and prince. This privileged access made the entire medical profession a resilient and often overlooked channel for the Whisper Network, one that operated under the sacred guise of healing. A doctor summoned to treat a baron's fever could linger in the sick room, his trained ear catching the patient's delirious mutterings about troop deployments or a conspirator's name. An apothecary delivering a calming draught to a nervous courtier might exchange the medicine for a tightly folded note, the transaction hidden within the ordinary business of health. Their movements, dictated by outbreaks of disease and requests for aid, provided the perfect, unsuspicious cover for crisscrossing contested territories where any other traveler would be stopped and searched. The international trade in rare medicinal ingredients wove this network across continents. A merchant ship carrying saffron from the east or licorice root from Spain was not just a cargo vessel, it was a link in a communication chain. The apothecary who ordered these supplies maintained correspondence with distant colleagues, their letters filled with seemingly mundane discussions of dosages and plant properties that could easily conceal coded political news or financial arrangements. Medical texts themselves became vehicles for secrets. A handwritten book of remedies passed from master to apprentice might contain a formula for a sleeping draught that, when the first letter of each ingredient was read in sequence, spelled out a warning or a list of names. The perceived neutrality of a healer was their most powerful asset. During a siege or a local war, a doctor could often pass through enemy lines to tend to the wounded, his medical satchel potentially carrying messages between the opposing commanders, all under a fragile flag of truce. Perhaps the most striking figures were the plague doctors. These masked specialists moving from one plague-stricken town to the next were feared and yet desperately needed. Their grim travels, often through regions others fled, made them ideal couriers for intelligence that had to move through areas of chaos and quarantine. While they battled a physical pestilence, they could simultaneously be spreading information, their beaked masks and protective robes hiding not just their faces, but their true role in the silent, endless war of whispers. A child's laughter could mask the most delicate of transactions. In the intricate web of medieval whisper networks, the young and seemingly innocent were often the most effective agents, their age providing a cloak of invisibility that no adult could ever hope to wear. Page boys in a bustling noble household were perfectly positioned to be the eyes and ears of a conspiracy. While serving wine or simply standing at attention during council meetings, They overheard every detail of political debates and private grievances, the adults forgetting their presence as one might ignore a piece of furniture. These boys, chosen for their loyalty and sharp wits, could then relay every word to their true patron through a seemingly innocent report about their day's duties. The constant movement of young apprentices between workshops offered another perfect channel. A master carpenter sending his teenage apprentice to a colleague in the next town to borrow a specialized tool was a routine event, raising no eyebrows. Yet hidden within that tool chest, or more likely memorized by the youth, was a detailed message about guild politics or a warning about a corrupt official. The apprentice himself, focused on his craft, might never even know the true significance of his errand, making him the perfect, deniable courier. Even children's games were co-opted into this silent service. The simple rhymes sung during a round of ring-around, the rosy or the complex rules of a ball game played in a castle courtyard could be subtly altered. A specific sequence of hops in a hopscotch pattern drawn in the dirt might indicate that a certain noble had arrived at the castle gates, or that the coast was clear for a secret meeting after nightfall. To any watching guard, it was just the noisy play of children, but to an initiated adult glancing from a window, it was a vital status report. The widespread tradition of fostering children between allied noble families wove the most durable threads of all. A boy sent to be raised in the household of a neighboring lord was not just a political hostage, he was a living bridge. He grew up forming deep bonds with his foster brothers and the household staff, connections that lasted a lifetime. Years later, when these children were adults governing their own lands, that childhood bond allowed for a frank and trusted exchange of letters and messengers that bypassed all official diplomatic channels. Their shared childhood created a whisper network rooted in personal loyalty, one that could operate for decades outside the view of kings and councils. In times of crisis, when the movement of every adult was scrutinized, a young girl delivering a basket of bread to a supposedly empty house, or a boy sent to fly his kite on a specific hilltop, became the only safe way to maintain contact. Their youth was their greatest weapon, allowing them to slip through the cracks of a watchful society, carrying the whispers that shaped the adult world they were only just beginning to understand. A poet's pen could write 2 poems at once, one for the crowd and one for the king. The grand literary traditions of the Middle Ages, from epic romances to delicate love lyrics, offered a perfect public stage for the whisper network's most subtle communications. Writers and poets developed the art of literary concealment to a fine edge, crafting works that sang one tune to the general public and whispered a very different one to those with the key. A court poet, paid to flatter his noble patron with verses about chivalry and undying devotion, could weave a dangerous political warning into the very same lines. A poem praising a lady's beauty, comparing her eyes to deep forests and her voice to a gentle stream, might secretly describe the terrain of a border region and the quiet movement of troops through its passes. To the uninitiated, it was a beautiful, conventional piece of courtly art. To the conspirators in the room, it was a vital military dispatch delivered in plain sight. Romances and chronicles, the popular entertainment of their day, were equally fertile ground. A fantastical tale about a knight battling a dragon in a distant land could be a thinly veiled allegory for a contemporary political struggle happening right in the listener's own kingdom. The dragon might represent an overreaching bishop, the knight a beloved duke, and the rescued princess the freedom of the local townspeople. Those without specific knowledge of the real events would simply enjoy a good story, while those in the know would understand the true message of resistance and hope being broadcast from the minstrel stage. This allegorical tradition was the ultimate shield, allowing writers to criticize tyrants, question church doctrine, or satirize powerful figures under the protective cover of fiction and metaphor. The visual art of the manuscript provided another layer for this silent dialogue. An illuminated manuscript, a prayer book, or a philosophical text was not just words on a page, it was a canvas of hidden symbols. A skilled illuminator could embed a portrait of a banned philosopher into the swirling vines of a decorative border. The specific flowers painted around a capital letter could spell out a name using the language of herbs, where rosemary meant remembrance and pansies represented thought. A tiny, seemingly accidental blot of red ink in the margin might mark the page as a safe haven for a particular sect. The book itself became a dual object, a public work of piety and a private repository of dangerous ideas, its secrets hidden in the splendor of its own decoration. These literary networks were especially crucial for spreading thoughts that could get a person imprisoned or worse. A radical idea about the nature of authority or a call for social reform was far too dangerous to state outright. But when that same idea was cloaked in the story of a peasant outwitting a greedy giant, or encoded in the complex symbolism of a religious play, it could travel from town to town, performed in public squares, and read aloud in taverns. The artistic medium provided perfect deniability. If confronted, the author could always claim his work was being misinterpreted, that the dragon was just a dragon. The real power of this system lay in its demand for an active, intelligent audience. It created a community of readers and listeners who had to think, to decipher, to look beneath the surface, training their minds to hear the whispers hidden within the roar of public art. A noblewoman's letter about the price of wool was never just about wool. While the formal power structures of the Middle Ages were dominated by men, a parallel and often more resilient whisper network thrived entirely under their management. Women, from the highest duchess to the humblest market vendor, built and maintained extensive communication channels that operated in the spaces men often ignored: the private correspondence, the household accounts, and the bustling marketplace. These feminine networks leveraged social roles and domestic responsibilities as the perfect cover for a sophisticated information exchange. A noblewoman writing to her cousin in a distant court would fill her parchment with news of children, pious reflections, and the management of estates. Yet woven between these lines of familial duty could be a detailed assessment of her husband's political rivals, the state of the local garrison, or the subtle terms of a proposed alliance. To any male official scanning the letter, it was merely woman's talk, but to the recipient, it was a vital intelligence briefing. Women's religious communities formed another powerful web. A Benedictine abbess corresponded with her Cistercian sister in another kingdom under the guise of shared spiritual guidance and administrative needs, their letters carried by trusted monastic couriers. These exchanges, shielded by the sanctity of the Church, allowed for the transfer of political news and coordinated action across enemy territories, all while appearing to discuss the price of altar wine or the discipline of novices. In the towns, market women were the central nervous system of local intelligence. The baker's wife, the cloth merchant, the alewife, these women interacted with dozens of people every day. A casual comment about a customer's large order for preserved meat could signal an impending military campaign. A warning about a dishonest supplier shared between stalls was also a warning about that supplier's political patron. Their daily gossip was a living database, constantly updated and disseminated under the simple guise of doing business. Perhaps the most durable threads in this web were spun by the management of marriage alliances. When a young woman was sent to marry a lord from a rival house, she did not sever her ties to her birth family. She became a permanent diplomatic channel. Her letters home, filled with seemingly innocent details about her new life, provided her father and brothers with an intimate, ongoing report on her husband's wealth, his temperament, his alliances, and his vulnerabilities. This created a lifelong communication line between families, one built on blood and personal loyalty that often proved more reliable than any formal treaty. The true genius of these feminine networks was their inherent security, because they operated within spheres considered private, domestic, or economically insignificant. They were largely invisible to the male-dominated authorities who focused on courts, battlefields, and councils. A king's spymaster would never think to intercept the correspondence between two abbesses or monitor the gossip at the butter market. This perceived insignificancy was their greatest weapon, allowing them to exert a profound influence on events from the shadows, controlling the flow of information that shaped the decisions of kings. A garrison changing its guard was never just about fresh soldiers replacing tired ones. The specific sequence of the watch, the pattern of horn blasts, even the way a sentry held his spear, could silently communicate the entire security status of a fortress to those who understood the code. A delayed changing of the guard might indicate that scouts had spotted something in the distance, while a guard who tapped his halberd 3 times against the gatehouse arch was signaling that all was clear for a messenger to slip out under cover of darkness. These seemingly mundane routines formed a constant, silent dialogue along the walls, allowing a commander to assess his situation without ever leaving his tower. During a grueling siege, this need for silent communication became a matter of survival. Besieged within stone walls, cut off from the outside world, garrisons devised ingenious methods to call for help. They might use a system of lanterns placed in specific castle windows, their positions forming a pattern visible for miles to a watching ally. A besieged garrison could release a small, marked raft into the castle's water supply, trusting the current to carry it to a downstream friendly force, the markings on the wood detailing their desperate need for supplies or the enemy's weakest flank. Trained dogs, able to crawl through the narrowest drainage tunnels, became vital couriers, carrying tiny messages tied to their collars from the besieged to their comrades in the field. Beyond the walls of any single castle, the professional mercenary companies operated their own borderless intelligence webs. A German Landsknecht and a Swiss pikeman, though they might serve rival kings, were often bound by a shared professional language and a network of taverns and mustering grounds where information was the real currency. A mercenary traveling from one war to another carried more than his weapon. He carried news about which princes paid their wages on time, which battlefields were death traps, and which commanders could be trusted. This informal labor network ensured that the most experienced fighters always had a sense of the wider conflict, their loyalties often following the most reliable information. The constant, lumbering movement of supply trains provided the perfect camouflage for this military whisper network. An ox cart laden with grain barrels or a wagon full of arrows seemed like nothing more than logistical support. Yet hidden within a sack of flour or a bundle of shafts could be a detailed map, a list of spies inside an enemy city, or a command to begin a coordinated attack. The carters and camp followers, considered the lowest rung of the military machine, were in fact the circulatory system of the army, their ordinary journeys keeping distant units informed and synchronized. In the chaos of campaign, where a shouted order could be lost to the wind or a lone rider could be intercepted, these silent, adaptive systems were the general's true voice, whispering his will across the battlefield long before the first arrow flew. A king's whispered command could launch 1,000 ships, but the silence that followed decided the fate of empires. These medieval whisper networks were not just a curious footnote to history. They were the hidden engines that drove its most pivotal moments. Consider the Norman conquest of England in 1066. Its success did not hinge on the Battle of Hastings alone. Long before William the Conqueror's fleet ever landed on English shores, a sophisticated communication network was humming between his court in Normandy and his sympathizers within the English nobility. Messages detailing King Harold's troop movements, the political mood of the Saxon earls, and the readiness of the English defenses had to cross the Channel, carried by trusted merchants or disguised pilgrims. Without this steady stream of clandestine intelligence, William's risky invasion would have been a blind gamble against a fortified and prepared enemy. The whispers from England gave him the confidence to sail and the tactical knowledge to win. Across the sprawling theaters of the Crusades, these information systems became the lifeline of entire armies. Coordinating a military campaign from the heart of Europe to the distant Holy Land was a logistical nightmare that official messengers alone could not solve. The Templars and other knightly orders perfected their own courier systems, but the real intelligence often flowed through merchant routes and religious networks. A Genoese ship captain might carry a coded report on the strength of Saladin's forces to a Venetian banker, who would then relay it to a papal envoy. A letter from a bishop in Acre discussing church doctrine could conceal a desperate plea for reinforcements, its true meaning unlocked only by a cipher known to a select few in Rome. The survival of Crusader states for nearly 2 centuries depended on this fragile, whispering web stretching across thousands of miles. Even the relentless march of the Black Death was tracked and documented by these very channels. As the plague swept through Europe in the 1300s, panic and isolation were the official responses, but merchant guilds, whose survival depended on knowing which ports were infected, maintained a grim flow of information. They shared what they knew about symptoms, attempted treatments, and the terrifying speed of the contagion. Jewish diaspora networks, often unfairly blamed for the disease, used their own secure lines to warn distant communities of approaching danger and to share practical knowledge about quarantine. While kingdoms crumbled into silence and superstition, these whisper networks created a shadowy, early warning system that saved countless lives by allowing people to flee or prepare. On the political stage, the foundations of modern liberty were laid in whispers. The negotiations leading to the Magna Carta in 1215 were not conducted in open court. They happened in hushed meetings between rebellious barons, their messages carried by loyal clerics and household knights who could move between the sides without attracting King John's immediate notice. The delicate alliances that forced the king to sign that famous document were brokered in back chambers and sealed with silent understandings, all coordinated through a network built on mutual interest and deep distrust of the crown. Similarly, the rise of powerful Italian city-states like Venice and Florence was fueled by the unparalleled intelligence gathered by their merchant and banking families. Their global whisper networks gave them a commercial and political advantage that allowed them to operate as independent powers, challenging the authority of popes and emperors. This hidden architecture of information reveals a profound truth about the medieval world. The public battles, the signed treaties, the coronations, these were the final, visible acts. But the real work, the plotting, the alliances, the desperate pleas, and the crucial warnings happened in the shadows. History was not just shaped by the swords you can see in a museum, but by the words you cannot hear in a quiet corridor, the coded symbols in a market stall, and the silent understanding between 2 trusted friends. The outcome of an era was often determined long before the armies met on the field, decided in the spaces between official words where a whisper could truly change the world. The scarcity of parchment and ink forced messengers to become living libraries. In an age where a single sheet of vellum could cost as much as a farmer's daily wage, committing complex treaties or troop dispositions to memory was not just a security measure, it was an economic necessity. This reliance on oral transmission honed the human mind into a formidable instrument. Messengers trained for years, developing mnemonic techniques to perfectly recall long strings of numbers, names, and detailed instructions. A single courier could carry the entire strategic plan for a rebellion in his head, a document that left no physical trace and could not be intercepted by any means other than his own capture and breaking. The slow, plodding pace of travel, whether by foot, horse, or ship, demanded a different kind of ingenuity, since a single messenger could be waylaid by bandits, felled by illness, or simply slowed by mud and winter storms. Vital messages were often sent in triplicate. 3 different couriers would take 3 different routes, perhaps one posing as a merchant, another as a pilgrim, and a third as a simple traveler. This system of redundant paths ensured that even if 2 messengers failed, the third would likely get through, weaving a web of resilience across the treacherous medieval landscape. This inherent delay also forced the creation of autonomous agents. A spy embedded in a foreign court or a ship's captain months from home could not wait for new orders. They operated under pre-arranged protocols, a set of if-then instructions that allowed them to make critical decisions on behalf of their distant masters. A merchant in a distant port might be authorized to pledge his lord's support to an alliance if he received a specific token, or a garrison commander might be ordered to hold his fortress for 40 days and then seek terms, all without a single new word from his king. This decentralization of command was not a flaw, but a sophisticated adaptation to a world without instant communication. Yet within these constraints, medieval minds engineered brilliant low-tech solutions. They crafted cipher wheels from wood or metal, simple devices with rotating discs that could scramble a message into gibberish for anyone without the matching key. They designed mechanical message containers with hidden levers and false bottoms, boxes that would destroy their contents if opened incorrectly. The very limitations that defined their world spurred a creative explosion in secure communication. In a profound way, the technological simplicity of the Dark Ages created a unique form of security. There were no wires to tap, no satellites to hack, no digital footprints to follow. A message hidden in a song, carried in a memory, or encoded in a tapestry pattern was secure precisely because it left no vulnerable technological trail. It existed in the ephemeral space of human trust and cleverness, a realm that often proved more resilient than any locked chest or fortified wall. We have gained incredible speed and reach in our digital era, but we have also lost that particular, profound silence, the absolute security of a secret that travels without a trace. A hollow book from the Dark Ages and a modern encrypted text file are built upon the very same human instinct. The fundamental principles that powered medieval whisper networks did not vanish with the arrival of the printing press or the internet. They simply evolved, finding new life in the digital systems we use today. Consider the ancient art of steganography, hiding a message within an innocent carrier. A medieval spy might have tucked a secret dispatch inside a wax-sealed loaf of bread, while today, a digital agent can embed an entire classified document within the code of a vacation photo shared on social media. The medium has transformed from physical to virtual, but the core strategy of concealment in plain sight remains identical. Modern encryption, with its complex mathematical algorithms, is the direct intellectual descendant of the simple substitution ciphers used by monks and diplomats. Where a medieval scribe might replace each letter with the one that follows it in the alphabet, a computer uses a nearly unbreakable digital key. The goal is the same, to render a message incomprehensible to anyone who intercepts it, but the scale of complexity has grown from a handheld cipher wheel to a global network of servers. Even with all our technology, the most sensitive intelligence operations still hinge on the human element, a truth any medieval spymaster would instantly recognize. Rogue states and intelligence agencies still run networks of trusted human sources and couriers, understanding that a personal relationship, a handshake in a shadowy alley, or a signal passed in a crowded market can bypass even the most sophisticated electronic surveillance. The social dynamics of the Whisper network are now amplified to a global scale through social media. A courtier's planted rumor in a royal hall has become a coordinated disinformation campaign on a platform used by billions. The village square where gossip about the king's health could shift market prices has been replaced by online forums where unverified tweets can trigger stock market crashes. This historical perspective offers a profound insight into our own chaotic information age. Our struggle with digital security, fake news, and the ethical use of data is not a uniquely modern problem. It is the latest chapter in an ancient human story, the endless contest between those who wish to share secrets and those who wish to uncover them. The technologies we wield are immeasurably more powerful, but the drivers behind them, our need for trust, our fear of exposure, and our capacity for deception, are as old as the first whispered warning passed between two allies in a darkened castle corridor. Our journey through these hidden pathways shows us a world that spoke in code, a civilization conducting its most vital business not with shouts from the ramparts, but through the subtle language of a merchant's display or the memorized verses of a pilgrim. These ingenious systems were not mere tricks, they were a profound testament to human creativity in the face of immense barriers. When official roads were watched and royal messengers could not be trusted, society naturally cultivated these parallel streams of information, proving that where a need exists, a method will always be found. The sheer resilience of these networks, operating without a single byte of data or an instant connection, points to a deeper truth. At its heart, communication is not a technical problem, but a human one. It thrives on the fragile, powerful foundations of relationship and trust, bonds that no amount of bandwidth can ever replace. In our own era, we are drowning in information yet often starved for truth. We have mastered the mechanics of global connection but sometimes forget the art of discreet conversation. The whispers of the Dark Ages offer us a crucial perspective. They remind us that technological efficiency must always be balanced with human judgment, and that the relentless pursuit of openness must leave room for the sacred space of discretion. The challenges we face with digital security, misinformation, and the erosion of privacy are simply new landscapes for a very old struggle. The need to share a secret carefully, to build a circle of trust, and to see the world as a place alive with hidden meaning, these are timeless human concerns. So the next time you send an encrypted message or question the source of a viral story, remember the medieval messenger committing his dispatch to memory. The tools have changed beyond recognition, but the fundamental dance between concealment and revelation continues. What invisible networks might be operating around you right now, hidden in the patterns of modern life? I would love to hear your thoughts on these historical mysteries of communication in the comments.